The world's most powerful mutant has awakened, and nothing can stop his rage, except the X-Men, who are about to face a challenge unlike any before. Matthew Malloy's power is beyond comprehension, capable of reshaping reality itself. But can he control it before he destroys everything? Charles Xavier made a decision that could haunt the X-Men forever: suppress a child's power or risk annihilation. Cyclops faces a moral crossroads. Should they contain the ultimate threat, or let Matthew choose his own fate? As time collapses and reality shifts, the X-Men must decide if saving Matthew Malloy is worth risking the end of everything. The mutant who could shatter reality. The world had always known mutants were different. They were anomalies, some born with powers beyond comprehension, others struggling to control the forces within them. But there had never been anyone like Matthew Malloy. The first time the world would know his name, it would be the last time they could ever forget it. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a faint orange glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood. It should have been an ordinary day. But then came the scream, an ear-splitting, gut-wrenching shriek that echoed through the streets, carrying with it an unmistakable terror. It came from a small house at the edge of town, where a man named Richard Malloy had just gone to visit his sister-in-law. He had no idea that this seemingly simple visit would end in utter destruction. Matthew Malloy, a quiet young man in his mid-20s, was trapped in his own mind, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. For years, his powers had remained dormant, hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly normal life. But emotions have a way of breaking free when least expected, and Matthew was about to learn just how much damage a single emotional outburst could cause. The scream was followed by an earth-shattering explosion. Matthew's sister-in-law, caught in his emotional wave, vanished in an instant, obliterated by the sheer force of his power. And that wasn't all. The blast sent shockwaves that tore through the entire town, flattening buildings, uprooting trees, and incinerating everything in its wake. In a matter of moments, the landscape had been transformed into a wasteland. At the center of it all, Matthew stood frozen, trembling with fear, his mind unable to comprehend what he had just done. He hadn't meant to destroy everything. But that was the problem. He had no control. His emotions, his fear, his panic. These things triggered a power so immense that no one, not even the most powerful mutants on Earth, could hope to match it. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of sirens began to wail, but they were meaningless. No force of law or order could stop what had just been unleashed. Inside the Jean Grey School for Gifted Youngsters, a storm was brewing of a different kind. Cyclops paced nervously, his thoughts tangled. The X-Men had always lived in the shadow of fear. Fear that one day, a mutant with power beyond comprehension would emerge. But nothing had prepared them for what had just happened. They had learned about Matthew Malloy only hours before, and already, the stakes were higher than they could ever have imagined. "We need to find him," Cyclops said, his voice tight with urgency. "Before someone else does." Beast was already at the computers, his fingers flying over the keys, searching for any trace of Matthew. He had seen the raw power of the mutant. Nothing could prepare them for what was coming. But despite his calculations, his face grew grimmer with each passing second. "It's not just about finding him, Scott," Beast said, turning away from the screen. "It's about containing him. If we don't, this world, this reality, will collapse under the weight of his abilities." Matthew Malloy wasn't just another mutant with a flashy power. He was something far worse. His abilities weren't bound by the laws of nature. He could warp reality itself, manipulate space and time, reshape the world to his will. But there was one crucial flaw in his powers: he had no control. And that lack of control made him the most dangerous mutant alive. Cyclops slammed his fist into the table. "Then we find him first. We contain him. We can't let him destroy everything." But it wasn't that simple. Back in the ruined town, Matthew was still reeling from the aftermath of his outburst. His mind raced as the chaos unfolded around him. The destruction, the loss of life, the fear. He couldn't understand it. How could he have caused all of this? Why hadn't anyone warned him that this power existed inside of him? He stumbled through the rubble, his body moving on instinct, not knowing where he was going or what he was doing. Everything felt distant, like he was trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape. His heart raced, panic rising with each step. He had never felt so powerless. But then, something shifted. His fear, his confusion, it all boiled up inside him. And with it came a surge of energy, an explosion of power, so intense it sent the ground itself trembling. His abilities had already begun to spiral out of control. He didn't know how to stop it. He didn't know how to make it stop. His mind felt like it was breaking apart, his consciousness shattering under the weight of his own fear. And that was when he felt it. Someone was coming. Someone with the power to match his own. At that moment, Matthew's eyes went wide with realization. The X-Men. They had come. They knew. Inside the Jean Grey School, Cyclops and his team prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Cyclops was leading the charge, but this time, it wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about saving a life that had the potential to destroy everything. "We need to approach this carefully," Cyclops said, looking at his team. "We can't just go in with guns blazing. We need to neutralize his powers without triggering another explosion. We can't let him hurt anyone else." But even as Cyclops spoke, he knew the truth. This wasn't just about Matthew anymore. It was about the survival of reality itself. They had no idea how powerful Matthew truly was. No one did. But one thing was certain. If they didn't act fast, the world as they knew it would cease to exist. Matthew stood alone, his mind torn between fear and anger. The X-Men were close, he could feel them closing in, but it didn't matter. He had no idea how to control the power coursing through him. He had never asked for this. He had never wanted it. His emotions surged again, and this time he didn't hold back. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered, as though reality itself couldn't hold on anymore. The skies above seemed to warp and twist, as the very fabric of existence trembled. And then, in the distance, he saw them. Cyclops, Wolverine, and the others. They were coming for him. They had come to stop him. But Matthew wasn't afraid anymore. The descent into chaos. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the X-Men made their way toward the heart of the devastation. Cyclops' visor gleamed with an intensity that mirrored the chaos unfolding before them. His mind was already calculating their next moves, but it wasn't enough. Nothing had prepared them for this. Nothing had prepared them for Matthew Malloy. "We need to move fast," Cyclops barked, his voice cold, focused. "No more delays." Behind him, Wolverine's claws shimmered in the dim light, his nostrils flaring as he took in the destruction around them. "You really think we can stop him?" Wolverine growled, his voice thick with skepticism. Cyclops didn't answer immediately. He knew Wolverine's doubts were valid. Matthew Malloy wasn't just another mutant. They had faced enemies before who could bend reality, but nothing like this. There was something in the air, a sense of inevitability, as if Matthew's powers were a force of nature itself, unstoppable, untouchable. "We don't have a choice," Cyclops said at last, his voice tight. "We stop him or watch the world burn." As they ventured deeper into the ruined town, the destruction became more pronounced. Buildings had been ripped apart like paper, the streets cracked wide open, and fires still smoldered in the distance. It was clear that Matthew had unleashed more than just a temper tantrum. The magnitude of his abilities went beyond any mutant they'd ever encountered. He wasn't just manipulating reality. He was warping it, bending it to his will. They finally reached the epicenter of the explosion. And there he was. Matthew stood alone amidst the wreckage, his body hunched over, his hands trembling as if he were holding onto some unseen force. His eyes, wide and filled with terror, were locked on something only he could see. His breath came in shallow gasps, and his whole being radiated a raw, untamed energy, like a storm ready to erupt at any second. Cyclops stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Matthew, we're here to help." Matthew didn't respond. He didn't even acknowledge them. Instead, his entire body shuddered as his power surged again, and the ground cracked open, sending massive chunks of earth flying into the air. "Stay back," Cyclops ordered. his visor glowing brightly as he extended his arm, unleashing a blast of optic energy at the ground. The force of the blast sent a shock wave through the debris, shaking the earth beneath them. But Matthew didn't flinch. He was consumed by something deeper than fear. He was drowning in it. His emotions were spiraling out of control, each wave of panic and anger escalating his power to destructive levels. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He wasn't even aware of what he was doing. But his fear was a ticking time bomb, and no one knew how much longer the world had before it exploded. "I don't want this," Matthew screamed, his voice breaking as the ground beneath him split even further. His powers surged uncontrollably, creating a vortex of energy that distorted the air around him. "I don't know how to stop it." Cyclops' heart sank. He could see it now. Matthew wasn't just a threat. He was a child lost in a storm he couldn't control. The raw, primal fear in his eyes mirrored Cyclops' own memories of times when his powers had manifested uncontrollably, wreaking havoc on everything he cared about. "We need to contain him," Cyclops said urgently, his voice low, "before he loses it completely." The rest of the team was on edge. Beast, ever the strategist, was already analyzing the situation. "We can't just neutralize him, Scott. He's too powerful. We need to find a way to reach him, break through the barrier in his mind. But it won't be easy. His power is linked to his emotions, and right now he's overwhelmed." Wolverine was already on the move, sniffing the air, his keen senses alert. "We don't have time for talk. I'm going in." "No," Cyclops snapped, his voice sharp. "We can't approach him like that. If we push him too far, it'll trigger another explosion. We need to calm him down first." Wolverine's snarl was feral, but he didn't argue. Instead, he clenched his fists and stood by, ready for whatever came next. Matthew was still trembling, his entire form radiating a chaotic energy that crackled in the air like static. Cyclops stepped closer, his eyes locked onto the young mutant, searching for any sign of recognition. "Matthew," Cyclops said softly, his voice carrying a tone of empathy. "I know you're scared. I understand. But you're not alone. We can help you." Matthew's head jerked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. You can help me?" he gasped. "I'm dangerous. I don't know how to control it. I hurt people. I killed them. I don't want to, but I can't stop it." Cyclops felt a pang of guilt. He knew what it was like to be consumed by power, to lose control and cause harm. But there was a difference. Matthew had never been trained to control his abilities. He was a force of nature, a child who had been thrust into a battle he never asked for. "Listen to me," Cyclops continued, his voice firm. "You're not a monster, Matthew. You're not what you think you are. You just need to learn how to control your powers." At that moment, something in Matthew's expression shifted. For a brief second, his fear subsided, replaced by something else. Hope, perhaps. But just as quickly, his emotions spiked again. His eyes widened and the ground beneath them cracked violently, sending a shock wave that knocked Cyclops and the others off their feet. "This is what I'm afraid of," Matthew screamed, his voice raw with pain. "I can't stop it. I don't know how." Wolverine's claws slid out with a flick, ready to spring into action, but Cyclops held up a hand, signaling for him to hold back. "We need to break through," Cyclops muttered, his mind racing. "We need to reach him before his fear consumes everything." The team had only one option left: Xavier's psychic legacy. Beast had already started to work his way through the technicalities of the psychic intervention, pulling up the old protocols Xavier had left behind. He had long suspected that something like this might happen, that one day someone with power beyond the X-Men's abilities would appear. And Xavier had prepared for it. Using Cerebro, Beast initiated the psychic signal. But just as they were about to make contact with Matthew's mind, a violent surge of energy erupted for Matthew, pushing them back. The shockwave was so intense that it disrupted the flow of Cerebro, causing the machine to overload and short-circuit. "No, we're losing him," Beast shouted. Matthew's powers were beyond anything they had ever encountered, and the more they tried to intervene, the more chaotic the situation became. As Matthew's power reached catastrophic levels, Cyclops' voice cut through the chaos. "We have one last chance. We need to break through his fear and show him he's not alone." But the question remained. Could the X-Men reach Matthew in time, or would they be the next victims of a power that could shatter the world? The final push, controlling the uncontrollable. The air felt charged with electricity as Cyclops stood at the epicenter of the devastation, staring down the most powerful mutant he had ever encountered. Matthew Malloy was more than a threat. He was a ticking time bomb, and the X-Men were running out of time to disarm him. Cyclops' visor flared as he locked eyes with Matthew, whose own gaze was filled with confusion, fear, and a wild, untamable rage. The ground beneath them continued to crack and quake, and the air around them, warped like the atmosphere, was bending under the weight of Matthew's emotions. "I don't want this." Matthew's voice cracked, a strangled sound of pure panic. He was on the verge of losing control again, the reality around him shimmering like water in a storm. "You have to control it, Matthew," Cyclops shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're not alone. You can control it." Matthew's chest heaved with every breath, his eyes twitching with panic. "I can't. Every time I try, it just makes it worse." The world around him pulsed with violent energy, flickering and distorting as if the fabric of reality was unraveling at the seams. Cyclops' heart clenched. He understood that fear, the sense that the power inside of you was too much to bear, that you were always on the verge of losing everything. He had been there before, and the X-Men had always been there to help him control his own powers. But Matthew's powers weren't just uncontrollable, they were apocalyptic. "We need to help him," Cyclops said, turning to his team. "We can't let him destroy himself or everyone around him." Wolverine, his claws retracted, took a step forward, his stance defensive but not threatening. "We need to get through to him. I don't care how we do it, but we need to make sure he knows we're here to help." Matthew's emotional state wasn't just dangerous for the world around him. It was destroying him from the inside. Every burst of uncontrollable power left him more broken, more isolated. His fears, his doubts, and his overwhelming guilt were warping his mind, making it impossible to see any path forward other than destruction. Beast was already preparing a mental intervention, pulling up old protocols Xavier had left behind in case of situations like this. "We've done this before," Beast muttered under his breath. "We have to find a way to reach him before it's too late." Cyclops turned back to Matthew, trying to block out the sound of his team's frantic preparations. "Matthew, you don't have to be afraid. We can help you. We can show you how to control this." Matthew's trembling hands clenched into fists, and the ground split open even further. A massive rift in the earth yawned beneath them, sending cracks of energy shooting through the sky like lightning. His emotions, raw and untamed, were feeding into his powers, making him lose his grip on everything. "Stop!" Matthew screamed, but it was too late. The entire landscape seemed to bend and warp, the sky above twisting in unnatural ways, reflecting his inner chaos. It was clear, Matthew wasn't just manipulating the world around him. He was rewriting reality, and his emotions were the key. In that moment, Cyclops realized they couldn't just talk him down. They needed to reach him on a deeper level, to connect with him emotionally. Only then could they help him understand his powers, and most importantly, control them. "Matthew, listen to me," Cyclops shouted over the roaring winds, his voice steady but firm. "I know what it feels like to lose control. I've been there. But you can still choose. You don't have to do this. You can make the choice to control it." For a split second, there was a flicker in Matthew's eyes. His hands shook, and for the first time since the destruction began, he seemed uncertain. His gaze flickered back and forth, torn between the power within him and the fear of what would happen if he let go. The X-Men saw the crack in his defenses, the tiny sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could reach him before it was too late. "Focus, Matthew," Wolverine growled, his voice low but urgent. "This isn't about you and us. This is about you and your power. You're not a weapon. You're not some disaster waiting to happen. You're a person who can choose." The words hit Matthew like a thunderclap. His breathing slowed for the briefest of moments, and the ground beneath him settled, the violent energy rippling through the air, slowly dissipating. But then his fear surged again. "I don't know how," Matthew cried, his voice cracking. "Every time I try, I just destroy everything." Cyclops stepped forward, his visor glowing brightly, his hand held out in a gesture of calm. "You don't have to do this alone. We're here for you, Matthew. Trust us. Trust yourself." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The air hung still as if holding its breath, waiting for Matthew's response. Matthew's hands trembled, but he finally lowered them, his mind clearing just enough for him to see the truth. It wasn't the power that defined him. It was how he chose to wield it. "Please," Matthew whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want it to stop." Beast, ever the problem solver, pushed forward with a plan. "We need to use Xavier's protocols. We can't do this by force. We need to reach him inside his mind, suppress his powers without triggering an explosion." Cyclops nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The stakes had never been higher. With one wrong move, Matthew's outburst could obliterate everything around them. But just as Beast initiated the plan, a new, more terrifying surge of energy blasted outward. The ground shook violently, and reality itself seemed to tear apart as Matthew's fears spiraled again. His power surged wildly, unchecked, and the X-Men were nearly thrown off their feet by the shockwave. "We don't have much time," Cyclops yelled. "We need to get through to him, now." As the team scrambled to stabilize their footing, Matthew's power exploded again, distorting everything around them. Time and space warped, reality flickering like a faulty TV signal. The sheer force of Matthew's uncontrolled emotions was becoming too much to contain. "Matthew," Cyclops shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. "You can control this. You can make the choice. Let go of your fear." But Matthew's fear was no longer just his own. It had become an all-consuming force, threatening to devour everything. With every passing moment, reality slipped further from his grasp, and it seemed like there was no way back. Cyclops could feel it. The world was on the edge of collapse, and Matthew Malloy was the only one who could either save them or destroy everything. The breaking point, a moment of choice. The air around them felt thick with tension, a static charge that seemed to pulse with every heartbeat. The ground cracked beneath Matthew's feet, splitting open like an enormous fissure. Every tremor in the earth was a reflection of the turmoil inside him. His power out of control, pushing the world closer to the edge of destruction. Cyclops' team was on high alert, but they could feel it. The weight of the situation, the knowledge that they were on the verge of losing everything. They had to act fast. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and it could all be over. "Matthew," Cyclops called again, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You have to listen to me. You can control this." But Matthew's eyes were wild, consumed by fear and guilt. His hands were shaking uncontrollably as he stared down at the destruction he had caused. The fear that had been building inside of him was now spilling out, into the earth, into the sky, into the very fabric of reality itself. "I'm trying. I swear I'm trying." Matthew's voice cracked, his words laced with desperation. "But I can't stop it. I don't know how." Cyclops moved closer, his steps calculated but cautious. They couldn't afford to startle him. The last time Matthew had panicked, reality itself had been torn apart. Now they had to reach him, show him that he wasn't alone, that his powers didn't define him. "We're here, Matthew," Cyclops said softly, his voice steady but full of urgency. "You're not a weapon. You're not a monster. You can control this power. You just need to believe that you can." The ground beneath them rumbled again, and Matthew's eyes snapped to the horizon, where the sky had begun to warp, twisting in impossible ways. Reality was unraveling, and every time Matthew's emotion spiked, the world became more distorted. "Don't you see? I don't want to hurt anyone," Matthew choked out, his voice barely audible. "But every time I feel something, this happens. I didn't mean to kill them. I didn't mean to destroy everything." Cyclops' heart sank. He could feel the weight of Matthew's words, the pain in his voice, the guilt, the helplessness. He knew that feeling too well, the fear that your powers could one day be the end of everything you loved. But Matthew hadn't been given the chance to learn how to control them. No one had shown him how to harness the power that coursed through him, a force so intense it could tear the world apart. But now he had the X-Men. They were here, and they weren't going to let him fall into the abyss of his own fears. "We're not here to hurt you, Matthew," Wolverine said, his voice calm but firm. He stepped forward, his claws sheathed for now. "We're here to help you control it. You don't have to do this alone." Matthew's gaze flickered to Wolverine, then to the rest of the team. They were all here for him. Cyclops, Wolverine, Beast, even Storm and Colossus, standing back, ready to move if things went wrong. They were all here, not as enemies, but as friends. But Matthew wasn't sure how to trust them. He had been alone with his power for so long, fighting against it, terrified of what it could do. Now, faced with a team that seemed so certain they could help him, Matthew wasn't sure if he could believe them. He had lost everything he cared about, his family, his life, because of his powers. And now the world itself was on the verge of being lost because of him. The energy in the air shifted, pulsing with Matthew's fear. The ground trembled again, and the sky above cracked with a violent flash of light. It was as if the world itself was at war, caught between Matthew's emotions and the fragile reality that surrounded them. "Matthew, stop!" Cyclops shouted, his voice breaking through the noise of the chaos. "You don't have to destroy everything. You have the power to choose." Matthew flinched, his hands curling into fists, his body trembling with the weight of the emotions surging through him. His chest heaved as he fought against the storm inside his mind, but the harder he tried to control it, the more the world twisted around him. "I can't control it," Matthew screamed, his voice full of raw pain. "Every time I try, it breaks me, it breaks everything." Cyclops took another step forward, his heart racing. He knew that time was running out. They couldn't let Matthew's powers tear apart any more of the world. But they couldn't just take them from him, either. They had to teach him how to control them. "Matthew, listen to me," Cyclops said, his voice softer now, more personal. "You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to fight this alone. We'll help you. We'll teach you how to control your powers. But you have to trust us." For a moment, everything went still. The air was thick, heavy with anticipation, and the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Matthew's eyes locked onto Cyclops, and for the first time since this nightmare began, something flickered behind his eyes, a glimmer of hope. I can control it," Matthew whispered, his voice trembling. Cyclops nodded. "Yes, you can. It's all about learning to control your emotions, Matthew. Your power comes from within, but it doesn't have to consume you. You can choose how to use it." Matthew's hands began to shake again, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was a different kind of tremor, one of realization, of understanding. For the first time, Matthew saw a path forward, a way out of the chaos he had been trapped in for so long. I don't want to hurt anyone anymore," Matthew said, his voice cracking with the weight of his emotions. "I want to fix this. I want to make it stop." Cyclops stepped forward, extending his hand. "Then let's fix this together." Matthew hesitated for only a moment before he reached out, his trembling hand meeting Cyclops' steady one. The moment their hands touched, a wave of calm washed over Matthew. It was as if the world itself paused, allowing him a moment of clarity, a moment of peace. The power inside him, which had once felt like a curse, suddenly didn't seem as terrifying. He wasn't alone anymore. The ground beneath them slowly stopped shaking, and the sky above began to clear. The distortion in reality began to fade, as if Matthew had finally found the strength to control the chaos he had unleashed. His power still thrummed in the air, but now, for the first time, he felt like he could control it. I'm in control," Matthew whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "I did it. I didn't break everything." Cyclops smiled, relief flooding through him. "You did it, Matthew. You're not alone anymore. And we'll help you control your powers, together." But even as the team celebrated their victory, They knew the battle was far from over. Matthew Malloy's powers were immense, and while they had taken the first step toward control, the real work was just beginning. The choice, the final battle for reality. The air had finally cleared, but the tension was far from gone. Matthew stood, trembling, surrounded by the X-Men, a child no more, but a young man burdened with unimaginable power. For the first time, he could see the world clearly, without the distortion of his fears, without the overwhelming weight of his uncontrollable emotions. Cyclops stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Matthew's. "You did it. You controlled it." Matthew nodded slowly, his breath shaky but steady. "But what if I lose control again? What if I hurt someone else? What if?" His voice trailed off, fear creeping back into his eyes. "You won't," Cyclops assured him, his voice calm but unwavering. "We're here, Matthew. We'll help you control it. You're not alone." But even as the words left his mouth, Cyclops knew they were walking a fine line. Matthew's powers were beyond anything they had ever encountered. Reality warping, limitless, uncontrollable. They had broken through his fear once, but they still had no idea how long Matthew could hold onto his newfound control. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled again, and the sky began to warp, once again distorting, twisting into impossible shapes. A deep, rumbling roar echoed through the air as a massive energy pulse shot from Matthew's body, sending shockwaves through the ruins of the town. "No," Matthew cried out, his hands clutching his head. "Not again. I'm losing control." His power was rising again, spiraling out of his grasp, threatening to tear apart the world. Cyclops' eyes widened. They had been too quick to celebrate. Matthew wasn't ready. He couldn't be, not yet. The force of his power surged again, and reality bent under its weight. Mountains rose out of the ground, entire buildings dissolved into nothingness, and the sky became a swirling vortex of colors, ripping at the seams. "We have to stop this, now," Cyclops shouted. Beast was already moving, trying to use Cerebro to stabilize Matthew's powers, but the machine was overloaded, malfunctioning under the strain of Matthew's immense energy. "This isn't good," Beast muttered, eyes scanning the readings. "His power is too much for anything we have. We need another way." "We can't fight his power," Wolverine growled, his claws gleaming. "But we can reach his mind. We have to get inside his head before everything goes to hell." Matthew's eyes flickered with desperation. I don't know how to control it. I can feel it slipping." He reached out, his voice breaking, as the world around them quaked violently. "I'm afraid I'll destroy everything." Cyclops knew what had to be done. They couldn't just contain Matthew's power. They needed to help him understand it, to fully embrace it. The path forward was clear, even if it was the most dangerous thing they could do. They needed to get inside Matthew's mind, to push past the emotional barriers and show him the truth about his abilities. "Matthew, listen to me," Cyclops shouted, his voice sharp. "You have the power to control this. You don't have to destroy the world. Trust us, trust yourself." With those words, Matthew's mind cracked open like an eggshell, and a flood of chaotic energy washed over him. The X-Men felt it, the overwhelming surge of raw, uncontrollable power. But they didn't flinch. They had seen destruction before, but this was different. This was not just another battle. This was a test of everything they believed in, everything Xavier had taught them. "We can help you." Wolverine roared, his voice cutting through the madness. He leaped forward, slashing the air with his claws, not at Matthew, but at the invisible walls of fear that Matthew had built around himself. Cyclops stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "We need to show him what he's capable of. Matthew, feel the power inside you. Don't let it control you. You control it." The world seemed to hold its breath as Matthew's mind and emotions collided. Reality around him twisted again, but this time, Matthew fought against it. He focused on his breathing, on the X-Men who stood beside him. For the first time, he saw the truth. He wasn't a weapon. He wasn't a monster. He was a person who had the power to shape the world, not destroy it. The swirling vortex of reality began to slow, then to stabilize. Matthew's power surged one final time, But this time, it didn't shatter the world. It lifted the debris around him, as if his emotions had found balance, his mind finally in control. I did it, Matthew whispered, tears streaming down his face. I didn't break it. Cyclops smiled, his voice steady. You did it, Matthew. You controlled it. But even as the team stood in relief, the storm in the distance loomed, a reminder that control was never guaranteed. Matthew had won a battle, but the war wasn't over yet. He would have to learn, to grow, and to keep his power in check for the rest of his life. As the X-Men gathered around him, Cyclops placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll be here, every step of the way. And so, the battle for reality came to an end, not with a dramatic clash, but with a quiet choice. The choice to fight against the fear, to embrace control, and to rise above the chaos. Matthew Malloy had found his place in the world, but the future was still uncertain. And that was the greatest challenge of all. The real question remained. Could he continue to control the most dangerous power in the universe, or would he be forced to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect it?